What I now want to focus on is time correction. So let's get under the hood here and talk all things time correction. I'll show you how it's done on the lead vocals. Back in my day when I was in choir in college, I had a choir director that would say the right note at the wrong time is still the wrong note. And I don't use a ton of my background of classical music education in my day to day anymore, but that one still rings really true. And I'd say all that to say that time correction and pocketing a lead vocal is ultra important. Just like we've talked about how tuning, getting every single note, right locked in place, perfectly in tune is crucial. So is the art of time correction. So time correction can be accomplished a couple different ways. One, you can actually time correct in Melodyne. So like if I take our verse vocal here, pop it open in Melodyne, you can over here on the time tool, which is right here, you can actually stretch notes forward and backwards, lengthen them, shorten them, all that fun stuff. There's nothing wrong with doing time correction that way. I know a lot of great producers that do all their pocketing that way, but that's not personally how I do it, just because I've always done it by manually dragging audio files around right here in Pro Tools. So that's how I time correct. And time correction, much like pitch correction and Melodyne, is a bit of an ear meets eye thing. Most of the music we work on in today's world is perfectly locked to the grid. And we can see our grid values right here of, this is eighth notes, that's quarter notes, that's 16th notes, so on and so forth. So if you have drums, let's say, that are perfectly quantized to a grid, and then synths or instruments that are perfectly quantized to the grid, there's a bit of a visual component of, again, always trust in your ear first, but there's a bit of a visual component of you can literally just look at audio files and know, okay, I'm ahead of the beat or I'm behind the beat, and you can go through a whole song that way and lock vocals visually while, of course, obviously checking in. This song from a vocal pocketing standpoint was a little bit interesting though, because the song was actually cut to drums that were mostly quantized. So all the instrumentation was cut to drums that were largely quantized and edited, but we wanted to preserve some of the feel of the real drummer up here. And if you solo up the drums to a click, let's actually do that. You'll hear that they're from a big picture standpoint quantized and in time, but they fluctuate a little bit forward, a little bit backwards from the groove. Let me show you what I'm talking about with that in the drums. Like you can hear that fill's not 100% locked. You can hear this kick drum right here. Like you can see it. That kick drum's a little bit ahead of the beat. And you can literally hear it flam with the kick right here. Like you can hear that kick and click flamming. So I say all that to say to where the vocal to the click track and perfectly lock the vocal to the grid, it's going to be out of time with the drums and the rest of the instrumentation because all the guitars, all the bass were tracked to that drum set, that drum performance that was just ever so slightly out of time. And that's not that uncommon in, more the Nashville live country world for the whole band to be perfectly locked with each other and pretty much on the grid, but the whole band might flux a little bit ahead of the beat or behind the beat. So in the case of this song, we can still use the grid visually with Pro Tools as our friend, but we're going to have to trust our ears more than our eyes. And again, that always matters way more at the end of the day. But I do want to mention, if you're working in more of a modern pop thing that's perfectly quantized, using your eyes visually is crucial. So again, literally what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go listen to the verse vocal and the pre-vocal kind of in the context of the track. And we're just going to nudge things, ahead of the beat or behind the beat. If this was an example of this song being perfectly locked to the grid, like this right here would be an example of a word that would be slightly ahead of the beat. And if I stay always in grid mode here in Pro Tools, but if I just hold down Command in Pro Tools, it disengages the grid. Whoops, Command bypasses the grid. That would technically be perfectly in time, more like right there. And then you see we're behind the beat. Same there. You put fades on it, so on and so forth. You'll see it in action. But again, we're not going to worry about being perfectly in line with the grid. We're going to use our ears. So let's just listen to this. And when something jumps out is out of time, we're going to fix it.
We keep talking about,
and I'm going to kill the click in this case because I don't want that distracting me.
We keep talking about packing it up, taking up.
So that packing it up felt ever so slightly rushed. I'm going to pop it just slightly this way and listen.
keep talking about packing it up, taking.
Went a little too much. Might want to bring it back, split the difference.
Talking about packing it up, taking.
Close. It might have been fine how it was.
Talking about packing it up, taking.
Yeah, I think that's better actually. So I might have been a little bit that way. It's throwing me off. I'm not gonna lie, not being perfectly locked to the grid. So it's we're just gonna figure it out, you know. And again, it goes back to that having a high bar and getting everything to the bar. We're just gonna move stuff around till it's right, and we're not gonna settle till it's 100% right. So that's all we're doing here. And I will mention too, I'm gonna use this time correction fades to get all my crossfades of splicing all my takes together. I'm gonna make sure all that's perfectly seamless from word to word, and you'll see that done here. So I'm gonna spend a lot of time putting crossfades in places, fading in and out to avoid unnecessary clicks and pops and that kind of thing. But going back to this, just listening.
We keep talking about.
What does that keep sound like pushed that way?
We keep talking.
No, I liked it how it was, so I put a fade.
We keep talking about packing it up, taking off a week or two.
I'm gonna just take that whole thing and push it ever so slightly that way. And you really can kind of change the vibe. Like not totally change it, but you can affect the vibe of if a singer is more behind the beat or ahead of the beat. And neither's right or wrong. You just have to be aware that you as a producer or vocal editor have the ability to change the vibe and feel of the performance by making it a little more rushed or a little more behind, all of that. So back to it.
It up, taking off a week or two. Just get about packing it up, taking off a week or two.
Taking off feels a little, let's go there.
Packing it up, taking off a week or two.
Cool, so that's good. So basically what I did there is I moved this back half. So what I now need to do is, you see we have a separated take. If I solo this,
Taking off a week or two.
it actually sounds pretty natural there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna splice these together and put a crossfade. So one place where if I need to stretch a phrase or shrink a phrase, S's and F's, non-pitched consonants, are a really good place to do that. You can get away with stretching those and putting crossfades over S's and F's, for instance, and it's going to sound really natural from an editing standpoint. So that's one good thing to keep in mind. Let's keep trucking.
It up, taking off a week or two, just gassing it up.
The gassing it up felt, I don't know if it was ahead or behind, felt a little off.
Just gassing it up.
I think it needs to go this way.
Just gassing it up.
And maybe gas is right, but I'm going to go use the S right here, shrink that, because that's going to sound natural. See what that does.
You just gassing it up.
There we go. See how that's a little more in the pocket? And we're dealing in like milliseconds, way zoomed in here.
You just gassing it up.
There we go.
Just gassing it up. Flying some gravel, coming unravel, finding ourselves again. Well,
I think all that feels good. Let's give that verse a listen for pocketing.
We keep talking about packing it up, taking off a week or two, just gassing it up. Flying some gravel, coming unravel, finding ourselves again. Well,
yeah, that sounds good. I cut out a little bit too much of the breath right here. It sounded a bit unnatural. Let me hear what that, so I had a fade like all the way too far over the breath, and I want a little bit of that breath. Again, just fine detail work right here, but all those details add up to really matter.
gassing it up, flying some gravel, coming unravel, finding ourselves again.
Yeah, so you hear how it sounds more natural with that breath in,
It up, flying,
as opposed to,
it up, flying,
I want that slight breath in just to give it that human feel. And then
finding our.
there's a no, I thought there was a mouth click there, but there's not. So you see, that's how we pocketed that. Let's continue on and keep doing the same thing in the pre-chorus.
Finding ourselves again. Well, I've been itching, been.
Okay, so that I've been is behind, and the transition of the breath here, I think going to a different take was a little off. So I need to solo both of these.
Ourselves again. Well, I've been.
There, that's more natural from a breath transition standpoint.
Unravel, finding ourselves again. Well, I've been itching, been wishing.
Yeah, so listen to how this was somewhere more like over here.
Again. Well, I've been itching, been.
How far behind the beat that is. We moved that somewhere closer to here, I think we had it.
Ourselves again. Well, I've been itching, been.
See how we're perfectly locked now? Now we need to make it make sense with the rest of this over here.
again. Well, I've been itching, been wishing for.
So you hear right there is an example of I've stretched audio one way and pulled it the other way, and there's a little artifact like this. There's a double consonant. You never want the double consonants. That's 101, like editing. You never want that, like this.
Been itching, been wishing.
So you can literally see it with your eyes right there and hear it with your ears. So I think what I'm going to do to combat it in this case is just drag this whole take, a couple milliseconds that way, and I think we'll be good.
Well, I've been itching, been wishing for again. Well, I've been itching, been wishing for the week.
Split the difference. We're dealing with nuanced stuff here.
Well, I've been itching, been wishing for the weekend.
Now that for the weekend feels ever so slightly behind, I'm going to use the F to join this together right here.
Been itching, been wishing for the weekend. Wanna jump.
Could go a little more on this bit, and then I might need to push that way preemptively. And this is just, again, years of doing this. Developing instinct is what allows you to kind of anticipate what's coming. But
been itching, been wishing for the weekend.
There we go. Listening.
I've been itching, been wishing for the week.
Itching feels like ever so slightly ahead. I'm just, again, looping this a bunch, listening to it until it just feels exactly how I have it in my head, how it should.
Again. Well, I've been itching, been wishing for the weekend.
There's like a funny mouth click sound. I might have to RX that. We'll see.
Wishing for the weekend. Wanna jump right off that.
So now that jump is behind.
Wanna jump right off that deep end.
So that whole thing feels ever so slightly behind. So I'm going to pull all of that forward.
Wanna jump right off that deep end.
Cool. Go a little more forward there. My grid would tell me I'm behind, but again, we can't really trust the grid too much in this song. The grid is a liar and a deceiver, so don't trust the grid in this song.
Wanna jump right off that deep end. Now there ain't no time for sleeping.
Yeah, so then you can hear we're behind there also.
Deep end. Now there ain't no time for sleeping. Too many places left to go.
So it seems like he just got a little behind the beat for the most part on this take. See, there's going to be some fades that we got to go clean up, but let's just see how we're doing big picture timing wise.
I've been itching, been wishing for the weekend. Wanna jump right off that deep end.
Felt ever so slightly rushed.
Wanna jump right off that deep end. Now there ain't no time for sleeping. Too many places left.
That feels like it needs to go a little to the left.
There ain't no time for sleeping. Too many places.
A little more left.
Time for sleeping. Too many places left to go.
There we go. A little more.
Time for sleeping. Too many places.
Yep. I think we're close.
Now there ain't no time for sleeping. Too many places left to go.
Is that too many need to go back that way?
For sleeping. Too many places.
I think it does. See how detailed this can get. And it's this fine balance of being super detailed, micro in the weeds, making sure every detail's right, but then staying zoomed out at the same time. It's this weird balance of the micro and the macro that we have to live in as producers. At the end of the day, it needs to sound great zoomed out. The listener doesn't care, nor should they care that I'm sitting here doing all this right now. All the listener should care about is the song hits them the right way and the emotion they get from the performance feels right. And everything I'm doing right now is with that end goal in mind of taking all the distractions out of the way so the listener can connect to the song and get the message of the song in the way that the artist intends for them to. So that's why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this because it's some technical nerd ego trip, like none of that. I'm just trying to best serve the listener by making the artist sound as good and distraction free as they possibly can here. So side rant, but back to it we go, making sure we're perfectly locked.
Well, I've been itching, been wishing for the weekend. Wanna jump right off that deep end. Now there ain't no time for sleeping. Too many places left.
Not quite close.
Sleeping, too many places left to go. Time for sleeping, too many places.
Places feels a little rushed now.
For sleeping, too many places left to go.
Nice. And then I might need to do a little RX mouth declick Want to get rid of all those. You know, the Manly Reference Cardioid is an amazing mic, but it's so detailed that I find sometimes singers get some clicky mouth with it that you don't want. And so sometimes just running this on parts that I hear it. Maybe that wasn't it.
Too many places left.
Maybe I'm hearing things.
Many places.
You know, it might have been this right here.
Too many places left to go.
Maybe that did something, maybe it didn't. I don't know. I'm just keeping it real.
I'm for sleeping. Too many places left to go.
And I'm hearing something there I don't like a mouth click or
Too many places left.
yeah, there's something in that dead space, like micro, I'm gonna get rid of. That fixed it.
Sleeping. Too many places left to go.
There was another one over here, I think.
Well, I've been itching, been wishing for the weekend. Wanna jump right off that deep end. Now there ain't no time for sleeping. Too many places left to go.
I think we got it. So hear how locked and in the pocket that is. And it's tuned, it's locked. Perfectly tuned, perfectly locked, but I think it still sounds natural. It still sounds like Brandon, the artist that you heard live in the room on part 1 of the series, but it just sounds like the best version of him, I think. You know, he sounds great. And I think it's a common misconception, you know, sort of maybe from the outside of like, oh, if a singer's really good, you don't have to go in and do all this stuff. Like if they're great, you don't even have to tune them. You don't even have to time correct them. Brandon is a great singer. He sounds great straight off the mic. He can sing his butt off and, you know, in front of really big crowds of people. But even with a singer as good as him or a whole bunch of other great singers and artists that I've been privileged to work with now for years in Nashville, I do this on every single singer. And I would almost say the better the singer, the more detail and care that I do in this process, the more you can get into those micro details to help them go from here to here, just that extra 1% to make a great singer sound as good as they possibly can. So, you know, I'm doing this on every single day, every single song I'm working on. I'm giving it this level of care and detail because the music we're working on matters and it deserves our best. So, you know, that's some of my why behind the what with this. So I've now gone through and pocketed the rest of the lead vocals in this song. You saw me do it in the verse and the pre-chorus. I did the same thing in verse 2 and the choruses and some of our, you know, ad-lib alt chorus lines we cut. And something that interestingly didn't actually come up in this song when you saw me pocket the verse and the pre, and I don't think it actually came up in the chorus off camera either. But one other technique that I'll use to actually stretch words or shrink words is this right here. And it gets a little, you know, kind of nerdy, but I think it's a really good tip and technique for you to know. So, like if I needed to, let's go take this word that Brandon holds out. This is really good on sustain words. And let's say I needed to shrink it.
Yeah.
Let's say I wanted to shrink that yeah from that long to, let's say it needed to be that long.
Yeah.
Well, I can shrink it, but as you heard, there's a giant pop right here where I made the edit. Listen for that pop. You don't want that. But fortunately, we have the tools at our disposal to get around that. And let me show you how I would get around it. So let's say that was the length it needed to be. So what you actually need to do is you need to, in these cases, when you need to lengthen a note or shrink a note, you know, and not using Melodyne, using Pro Tools or any other DAW, this will apply. You need to zoom way in on the note and actually pay attention to the waveform. And again, like I'm not overly sciencey, overly technical, but if you look right here, like following this waveform, you see this pattern of the note that Brandon's singing has kind of this up and down and up and down and up and down. And it's kind of like a repeating, like there's these little moves right here. It's almost like an EKG or something. Like the waveforms look consistent. It's like this guy here and then that guy there, then that guy here and that guy here. I'm sure some science person who's smarter than me, like tell me what's going on there, but you see pretty much on any waveform of one note, you see patterns in the waveform like that. So the reason why that pop occurred is you can see I drug it to a place where our pattern got totally disrupted. We have our nice down, up, down, up, down, up. And I drug it right here. Our pattern got disrupted and the audio got mad. So it popped and clicked. What I can do, you know, with like this works almost every time. And if it doesn't work right here, I'll nudge it around till it does work. You can almost always make this work. But what I need to do to either stretch or shorten the note is I need to get the waveforms to match up. So if I go more somewhere more like this, you can see that I've effectively, I think, joined the waveform to have our pattern, yeah, continue here. And then if I put a crossfade over that, it looks like a really big crossfade, but if I zoom out right here, it's actually a really tiny crossfade because we were way zoomed in on the weeds there. If I push play on that, I think it should work. I'm sure because I'm filming it won't, but let's see what happens.
Yeah!
What do you know? It worked. Totally seamless. So I shrunk that note quite a bit. And again, the reason it was able to work is because I took our waveform pattern, essentially healed it together, but just shrunk it. You could do the same thing if you stretched it and put the crossfade right there at that point. So again, I think that's a great technique for you to be aware of. If I can't use consonants or nudge hole phrases like I was able to in the majority of this song, and I need to actually stretch words, that right there is how I do it. Hey friend, Christian Hale here. Thanks so much for checking out today's video. Real quick, I actually wanted to let you know that this video is a part of a larger video, which you can find linked down in the description below or over on the end screen. So if this content was helpful and you want to go even deeper on the subject matter and see it in its full context, definitely go check out that video for more. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you real soon.